In Football Manager, every attribute has a reason for being there. All of them play their part. However, some attributes I think are completely overlooked within the game by some people. It's easy to look at your striker and only focus on his finishing, or look at your defender and only focus on his tackling, but there's so many other aspects of a player's game that can make them lethal within the in-game engine. Today, I'll be picking my favourite attributes that I think people need to pay some more attention or respect to when signing a player or picking a player for their team or making a tactic, whatever it might be. These attributes can inform our decisions. What I want to know from you guys though is to let me know your most important attribute when you sign players. Do you only focus on determination and finishing? Do you really love bravery? Let me know in the comments down below, and smash the like button if you enjoy this one. Hopefully it'll be quite a quick one, but we are going to use my Aberdeen save here, which, by the way, as a side note, whilst we go and find a player, if you want to check this save out, you can find it on my channel, linked in the description. We've got loads of videos over there, this save, some rebuilds, and also some Wonderkid videos where we spotlight certain Wonderkids that you should try that you might not have heard of. So come check that out if you would like, I'd greatly appreciate it. But let's start off with these attributes, shall we? I'll go position by position, and then at the end, I'll reveal the one that I think people need to pay the most attention to out of anything. But yes, Keely Roos is our goalkeeper here in this Aberdeen save, and the Dutchman does fairly well for us. He's not exceptional, he's pretty good behind a good defence. In terms of what attributes we're looking for in a keeper, that of course depends with every position, I suppose, on what kind of tactical style and role you're trying to use them in, but there's a few that we should really focus in on. So obviously, you know with a goalkeeper that you want good one-on-ones, good reflexes, the standard goalkeeping attributes. But the ones that I'm really looking for in my goalkeepers is one, anticipation, and this is going to be a theme in a lot of players. Anticipation, as you can see, reflects the player's ability to predict and react to events going on around them. Now, the higher that is, the better your player will react to the in-game situation, and with a goalkeeper, that is very, very important. Now, Keely Roos doesn't have a very high level of this, and I'm not saying that he's completely useless without having these attributes. These are just ones I think loads of people overlook when they're trying to decide if a player is good or not, worth signing, and whatnot. Decision making is another one for me, the player's ability to make the correct choices, both without and with the ball. Now, this can come into play in a lot of ways. Let's imagine he had a 19 for rushing out and loved to rush out, but actually only had 8 for decision making. As good as he is at rushing out, he might be doing it at the wrong times and causing errors, so we want to make sure that these mental attributes are at least at a decent level. Decision making and anticipation, but for me, the other one is positioning. Now, if you read about positioning, it's very long, but it's basically where a player positions himself defensively, not offensively, to deal with an attacking threat. So having high positioning on your goalkeeper will hopefully put them in the right areas to make those big saves, make those big stops, and combined with other attributes, it will help a lot. It's all well and good having handling and reflexes, but if he's not in the position to make the save anyway, he's going to struggle. So that's goalkeepers. Now let's move on to centre-backs. Now with centre-backs, a lot of us are looking at pace, strength, marking, heading ability, tackling, and depending on whether you want a ball-playing centre-back, of course you're going to look at passing and vision, but there's certainly other attributes that need to be focused on, and once again, it comes in the mental section, where I feel a lot of people overlook certain attributes. Now if you're after a passing centre-back, then composure can be extremely useful. If you have a player who's great at passing but has one composure, when the opposition press him, the chances are is that he's going to panic and make the wrong decisions on the ball. So you want to combine high composure levels with good decision making and passing for a ball playing centre-back. The two attributes that I think are important no matter what role you're playing a centre-back, and the overlooked ones that I want to focus on, is the positioning attribute, which I feel some people do look at, but again, you can see how important it is. It determines where they're going to position themselves in the defensive phase based on any threats that are coming towards them. You want them to be in the best position to make use of those other attributes like tackling, like marking, but the other one that I really want to focus on is anticipation. Now, I'll use Thiago Silva as an example of how this can be very effective. As we all know in real life, he's an old centre-back, but he's still playing super well. Even though he's lost a lot of that pace, he makes up for it with his anticipation and his reading of the game. If you combine that with decision making, you'll get a player who can make the right decisions and doesn't have to rely on his pace all the time. He can put himself in the right area, and that way you can negate any physical issues that a centre-back might have. The same way, if you have a player who has really poor anticipation and is getting beat every time, if he's really quick, you might be able to make up for it. Next, we have fullbacks, and whether you're after someone who's going to maraud forward or hold their position and defend nicely, I think everyone is usually looking at crossing, maybe passing as well, tackling, marking and whatnot. Everyone focuses on these technical attributes, but for me, a massive part of being a fullback is that work rate, particularly if you're using them in a more modern setup in terms of getting forward and bombing up and down the line. You want that work rate so the player will work hard for your team. Teamwork is also going to come into play as well. You want someone that's going to link up well with their teammates, particularly with a fullback. If you're playing some kind of wide system, there'll be another player in front of them that might be going inside that they need to square the ball to and make up that decision as to whether they should cross it. So with a fullback, I'm often looking out for that teamwork and work rate, but everything else is fairly self-explanatory. Of course, it's going to highlight the attributes that the game feels are needed, but for me, there's just a few others that really, really matter. Now, the most overlooked attribute for wide players for me is the off-the-ball attribute. This determines how well they can get themselves in positions to receive passes in dangerous areas, and when you want a winger either cutting in and scoring or getting out wide for the cross or getting to the byline and pulling it back, all the time you want them to have that good off the ball work. Of course, you want them to be quick, agile usually, to get past their marker, depending on what kind of role you're using. Dribbling, flair, all of that usually comes into play, but I'm always looking for that off the ball technique from a player to see just how well they can make the right runs in behind. If you had a really good inside forward, one without good off the ball and one with off the ball work, you will see a lot more goals from that player with a good off the ball ability because he's getting into them right areas to finish off the chances. And whilst it is exciting sometimes to focus on the player's speed and attacking ability, sometimes we need to take more of a note of these mental attributes. Another one that comes into play that we spoke about already but is particularly effective with wide players is teamwork. It's the ability to make the right decisions with their teammates, and how often have you seen your player get into a great position to square it and then they just end up shooting it and blasting over the bar? Well, if you had good teamwork on your wide player, there's less of a chance of that happening. You'll see a much better link up, probably more assists as well from your player, depending, of course, on what role you're using them in. But even with limited technical and physical ability, if you had great off-the-ball work and teamwork, you will see some decent results from your player. The centre of the park in midfield is a very interesting one because there's a few different attributes that you want to consider, and of course there's so many different roles and areas to play. A lot of the time, the ones that you want to focus on are role dependent, but there are some attributes that people overlook. Remember here, we're not looking for the most overpowered attribute. If you want to see that video, let us know in the comments, but instead we're looking for the ones that you just need to take a little bit more of a note of when looking at players. Now, you'd look at Fabrizio Diaz here, and he does everything superbly well, but there's a few things in his game that are making a big difference that a lot of people might not notice. Yes, he's pretty physically well-rounded, but if you're looking for a player to do a lot of work in the middle of a park, then again, work rate needs to be focused in on. With him, I play him as a deep line playmaker though, so there isn't really that much work rate needed for that position. Instead, you'll be looking at vision, passing, and technique, which I think is extremely important for a midfielder to focus in on that technique because it can really add to their level of being able to pull off those crazy passes that get your team in behind. If you had a player with good technique, passing, and vision, and you combine that with a trait such as play killer balls, you will see a lot of brilliant assists from your guys. But for me, first touch is an important one. A player's decision making is obviously very important. Anticipation too, being able to read the game. There's a lot that comes into play with a midfielder. I think composure for me is one of the most important ones though. Often in the middle of a park, it's very busy, players are being pressed left, right and centre, there's a million different decisions to make, and often players with low composure will get overwhelmed and low decision making too and make the wrong decisions. But if you can find someone who's composed in the middle of a park, can play nice passes and works well with their teammates, you are going to see some great results. So I'd say make sure you're focusing in on that composure and the decision making, and with that combined with some nice technical and physical attributes, you'll be on for success in the middle of the park. And now we get on to the most interesting one of the lot, the striker position. Now you might think, yeah, striker just needs to be quick and maybe good finisher, right? But that's not always the case. Let's take this man, for example. His name is Duke and he has 11 finishing, which is not terrible by any stretch of the imagination, but you wouldn't imagine this guy would score this many goals in all competitions and completely dominate when given the chance up front, particularly when you highlight he's playing as an advanced forward and realistically he can't do anything too well. Now he's he's not really the best decision maker, he's not super composed in front of goal. He does have good off the ball work and works hard, but outside of that, there's not too much going for him. But for me, for strikers this year, I feel like those physical attributes really make the difference. We did a video the other day called We Broke Football Manager, where we had a player whose only thing going for him really was that he was super tall and had great jumping reach. Now that pretty much destroyed the in-game engine, and with Duke, he's done a very similar thing. He shouldn't be expected to score this many goals when he's not a great finisher, but with a striker, if you can find someone with really high levels of physical ability, so Duke's pace in this example, he's getting in behind and scoring lots of goals purely from his runs past the defence and finishing very easily. So whilst I don't think many of you will actually be overlooking those physical attributes, it's always worth taking a note of that you don't want to completely rule someone out because their finishing might not be high. But on top of that, ideally you would want a striker who has good off the ball work, good decision making, composure and anticipation. They're all highlighted but not focused on enough. Off the ball work means he'll make good runs in behind. Decision making, you want him to take the right decisions in front of goal and you want him to be composed. Again, Duke isn't actually very good at this. He's just a freak of nature in terms of his physical attributes, but with a striker, I'd always say don't get pulled in too much by those technical attributes. Focus in on the physicals and mentals, and if they're half decent, you've got a good chance of a player who is going to score you a hell of a lot of goals. But with that being said, we've covered all the different attributes that I think are overlooked in terms of the visible ones, but a lot of the time, there's a hidden attribute in the game that a lot of people are missing. I've spoke about it a lot on the channel, and that is consistency. Now, consistency isn't something that you can see straight up. It's a hidden attribute that you can only see with the in-game editor, but the higher level of consistency a player has, the more often they'll actually perform to those attributes that you're going to see when looking at a player. If they have low levels of consistency, let's say 5 out of 20, it doesn't exactly work like this, but you can imagine it as 1 in 4 games he actually plays to the level of his attributes seen on screen. The other 75% of the time, he's playing at a level lower than what you would expect because he just is not consistent. A player's consistency is the ability to play at his level on a regular basis, and it's why you'll see players with higher consistency often getting better average match ratings across the course of a season because they are so consistent, they perform more regularly, and you don't have to worry about them being one-hit wonders. So for example, Fabrizio Diaz is always consistently good for me and does a great job. Ryan Duncan has low consistency, as you can see on his coach report, and he is a bit hit and miss. Sometimes does well out wide and sometimes does absolutely nothing. And yes, they are hidden attributes that you can't see, but often they will be in your coach reports. If you see consistency on the pros section, it means they've got high consistency. The darker the green, the higher the consistency, and the same on the other end of the spectrum. If they're not consistent, you'll see it as a con. The more red this image is, the worse they are in terms of their consistency, and if you don't see it, it probably means their consistency is somewhere in the middle, say 10, 11, 9, and doesn't really affect their game all that much. But you want to keep an eye out for those consistent players because it will really help them in their game. So those are the attributes that I would focus on. I'm not saying never look at finishing or passing or technique on your striker, or never look at tackling on your central midfielder. It's more about focusing in on those ones that people don't look at, particularly in this mental section, that are affecting your players on the pitch and are probably the reasons that half the time you're shouting at them for making the wrong decision or not making the right run. In Football Manager, there's meant to be some kind of logic behind every decision. All of these numbers are crunched into some kind of calculations during your in-game matches that determine how well a player does, and there's a lot of these that people will ignore that are having a huge effect, so make sure you're keeping an eye out for those. Let me know if you'd like to see a video on what I think the most overpowered attributes are in FM, and don't forget to like the video if you have enjoyed. Come check out the Aberdeen save on my channel, linked in the description, but most of all, have a great day everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thank you and goodbye.